All right, good morning. Welcome to our city council work session. Oh, sorry, am I speaking up now? Our city council work session meeting for today, March 26, 2026. So I'll call the meeting to order now at 10 a.m. And Erica, would you mind saying the invocation? Sure. All right, if everyone will please stand and remain standing for the pledge of allegiance.
Father, we come to you today to thank you for the beautiful weather and all the wonderful people and citizens in our city that make it very unique. We ask you to guide the council in making wise decisions for the city, the citizens, the people that frequent our city, and to the best of our ability. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Erica. Do a roll call. We're all here with the exception of Mayor Moncrief. Before we go to agenda approval or during agenda approval, we need to change this from a special called meeting to a regular work session.
Wasn't it advertised correctly?
We didn't get it on the website. And in Georgia code, it does require you to have a website that goes to the website. However, for the proclamation piece that would have changed the meeting, we actually don't need a vote on that. Our charter does not specify how the proclamation is to be executed. And then most with standard other cities, it's usually introduced and then signed off by the executive or the mayor or mayor pro tem.
So that would be the only change on the agenda before we get started is under new business, item number 7, vote for the proclamation. It would just be a discussion.
I make a motion to approve the agenda with the change of item number 7 under new business being changed from a vote to a discussion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Please raise your hand to vote yay. Opposed? It was unanimous. All right, let's move to old business. Joe, will you take that for me? Our first item is the employee retirement plan.
Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
As we've talked about, we've been searching for a viable alternative to a pension for retirement for employees and the possibility of elected officials within the city. We believe we have something worked out really well now with GMA's offering. I did pour out all the documents associated with this, and as you saw, it was a pretty hefty book. So instead, I did condense it down utilizing the information in there and the information in the transmittal letter. So it's a combination 401A and 457B plan. 457B plan owns the employee where they put their retirement funds that come out of payroll. The 401A plan is where we would contribute matching funds to that plan. And all that would be administered by GMA as trustees. So the tentative effective date would be May 1st of this year. Trustee would be the Georgia Municipal Association. Eligible employees would be all employees to include elected or appointed members of the governing authority. So that would just be paid members if they're appointed. Minimum working hours a week is there's no minimum required working hours to participate. Waiting period for participation. Eligible employees who are employed on the date of the plan's adoption will be given credit for prior service as an employee for the purposes of satisfying the waiting period. The waiting period will be a period of 6 months. to be able to start participating in the plan. Employer contributions. For each payroll period in which a participant contributes to the City of Walnut Grove's GMA 470 plan, the employer will contribute 100% of the dollar amount the participant contributes up to a maximum of 3% of the participant's includable compensation per payroll period. So that would be their salary, wages, or hourly wages, not any overtime, or anything of that nature.
Would it be pre-tax,
Say again.
pre-tax, their
Yes.
contributions?
Their contributions, so this is a Roth plan, so it would be tax going in.
Okay,
Additionally, for each payroll period in which the participant contributes more than 3% of their includable compensation, the city will contribute 50% of the resulting additional dollar amount as the employer matching contributions for an additional maximum of up to 2% of the participants' compensation. So the cap will be a total of 5% of their includable compensation. And the way that works out is the first 3% we would match 100% of that. And then the following percentages, it would be 50% of that percentage up to 5% total per payroll period. For vesting, it's going to be a cliff investing. Employee contributions are 100% invested after the participant has been employed as an eligible employee for 2 years. Matching contributions remain 0% vested until the participant satisfies that full vesting period. So the way it works out financially for us, per year, including employees and all staff members of our current staffing, would be $16,519.55 per year. Per pay period, that's approximately $317.68 since we're paid weekly. Now that would work out differently for council members and mayor, since you're not paid weekly. So that's why I have the approximate there. That's what we'll have to have.
What was the total again?
The total per year would be $16,519.55. The total to our next budget cycle, since it is 5% of the payroll period, $2,541.44. So that would be the maximum amount we could pay until our budget cycle. We have $15,000 right now budgeted for it.
Say the number for the budget one more time.
To our next budget cycle will be $2,541.44. Currently, we have $15,000 budgeted for this.
And no one's required to participate, that's all. So if there's only one person that wants to participate, we're still good with GMA.
Correct. So GMA is actually one last thing is the administrative costs. So that's one of the things that put pensions out of our reach. It's hard to find when a city pays administratively for this, but just scouring budgets for pensions, it looks like some cities of our size or up to 10 employees were paying over $60,000 a year for a pension program. And then that just continues to get larger as employees retire. And then having committees to manage that as well. So the administrative cost of this plan would be $15 a quarter and 6% annual account balance of the employee, not the employer. So to participate, there is a fee for the person participating.
So
Essentially.
6% fee based on the employee's account balance annually is passed to the employee, not through the city.
Correct.
So
And that's to administer their personal account.
Yeah.
Through their 470.
And what was the fee? What would you say the fee?
It's $15 a quarter, and he put 6% annual account balance. I'll have to do a double check on that.
16?
6%. I'll have to double check with Mr. Baskin on that. It does seem that might be high, maybe a either or scenario. So I'll double check with him on that as well. Just to verify that's the number he necessary.
And any contributions made during those first 2 years before they become vested, what happens if they leave us during that 2-year period?
So if it's in that 2-year period, that money, there's a whole,
Formula.
not necessarily a formula, because it's flip investing. It does get retained by the city. However, there are legal channels of how it comes back to the city since it's in that account.
So the employee's contribution goes back to the city?
No, the employee's contribution always stays. It's just our matching contribution.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So this says all employees, including elected and appointed members of the governing authority. So does that include, like
DDA.
Judge Barth is appointed?
He's a contractor.
Okay,
As council, we would be included. Because we're considered employees.
In this context, it's more talking about, say, we decided to start paying our planning and zoning committee,
Mhm.
then they would be eligible if they received a payroll paycheck.
The city council members may be a little more complicated. I know I've seen the rule in the past, but it may be considered altering y'all's compensation, which would have its own big period election. But I need to confirm that.
That's my next question.
Well, I know there's at least one council member that's too old to worry about the future, so that's not a problem with
I
me.
think I know the other.
That ship's already sailed.
I just hated we had to go back to being an employee because I'm losing at that $30.
I know.
And in the social security, I get back $1 a month more on my check.
Well, is there any further discussion on the retirement plan? Any more questions?
There's no minimum of employees that have to sign up.
No, no.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
It's not like our stipend, so.
All right, so now we will move on to new business. First item is discussion of a proposed ordinance requiring a special use permit for smoke, vape, and hemp retailers. Hope you all have had time to read this proposed ordinance, and at this time, I will open it up for any discussion, questions, thoughts.
as of now, we don't have, this type of business that isn't actually listed in our ordinances. And what is it, what are the current vape shop, what is it listed under, special use?
It's listed as a Ryan's.
I think this is probably pretty important, to see if we put something in place. I'm not sure we're 100% there with these, but certainly the work that was put into making these ordinances. Well, we'll start with the first one. Seems to be in order for what we're gonna need coming up.
The goal in making this proposed ordinance is just to provide a clear path. No matter what type of retail shop or otherwise you were trying to establish in the city, we're not trying to deter business, right? But this also will help us to
Right.
regulate it a little better,
I was gonna say, it helps us enforce when need be,
right?
and to know where the enforcements can occur.
Linda, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
You have a question or comments? Yeah, go ahead.
So, some of these ordinances, they're in the raw form right now, it's showing the intent. As we move along, some of these will affect already passed codes and ordinances inside of our, city code, to include our zoning ordinance. So I do have a couple of notes based on what this will affect for consideration. So for a special use permit itself, this would require an update to our zoning under permitted uses, allowing for vape shops, things of that nature, however we want to classify that. And then this is where that special use would, lie, or conditional use. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes.
So that would have its own category.
So I had a similar comment when we're reviewing this, and so we've got three sort of similar ordinances here. The first one I really consider the zoning ordinance change, which you'll have to advertise and go through public hearing and all of that. The other two, probably the future would be combined to make it a little cleaner and not have two separate ordinances on very similar things and still achieve all that you want to. The other thing I'll say is these changes would not affect places of business currently selling these products. They would be grandfathered in.
Right.
Now, when you say grandfathered in, is that indefinite amount of time?
As long as
As long as they
as long as they continue the use and keep up their business license.
Okay.
So if we require a special use permit and they have to renew their business license for the next year, they will not ever have to do a special use permit?
Correct.
Okay.
But if their business license were to be suspended,
It's usually it's, so you have to, the legal term is you have to abandon the grandfathered use, right?
okay,
And usually that is defined as not having a business license for some period of time, generally 6 months or a year,
okay.
or that you stop the use altogether for that same amount of time.
So does that need to go into the ordinance as well?
We can add a grandfather clause. It would still.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to have it spelled out,
Yes.
but there's no question.
But is there only the one, or is the other convenience store in the donut shopping center sell these sort of products as well?
There's actually 3 retailers that sell these type of products that I'm aware of right now. If you're aware of another one, let me know. It's the Food Mart and the Sparkwell. I think it's named MVP.
Only sells tobacco products, vapes.
Okay.
They do not sell him right now. They haven't come to us with their license yet.
They sell bread and or any other stuff.
Not supposed to be.
Okay.
Who's that?
The Food Mart.
Oh, well, they had a Kratom sign out there.
We did have that removed that sign.
Okay.
Are they still lighting up all their signs?
No, they took them down.
Something on section 6, review criteria. On the first article of that, the proximity for proposed business, schools, parks, churches, nature centers, and residential neighborhoods. I did realize after I took notes on this, that is spelled out in the third ordinance.
Right.
So the zoning of those would probably get combined together as we talk about that. The potential impact on minors and youth access to intoxicating substances. I would recommend personally that, we have a measurable on that, something to have based on that. That way it's objective and not subjective. And then revocation under section 9. Special use permit may be revoked by the city council after notice and hearing. I would recommend having that administrative. That way they still have the ability to appeal to council. And giving them that due process.
So could it just say maybe revoked by the city
They could.
and leave the word council out? We have protocol for what city means.
Right.
Great, it's great information. Thank you. Are there any further questions, comments? No. Okay. On to number 2. We will now discuss the proposed ordinance establishing tobacco, vape, and hemp retailer licensing requirements. And I'll open the floor for discussion.
I don't have any questions about it. I think it looks good.
This is a separate license similar to what we have, like with liquor store.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's important. Yes.
Any comments from you, Linda?
No.
Questions? No. All right, Joe?
I
Anything?
have
Jerry?
a question.
Yes, sir.
In the limiting of licenses.
Number 5?
Yes,
Section 5?
section five, sorry. It's one license per 5,000 residents. We already have 2 or 3 businesses selling it, so we're gonna correct it out to 1 more.
This is open for discussion, so I think we need to have this discussion. This was just a idea, and that's why it's proposed, so,
In agreement with Jay, I did put problematic right there.
Yeah.
Due to us already having some.
right.
I think it'd be good to have because we are gonna have to, I recommend us taking this to a public hearing and really spelling out why that's important.
Yeah.
One license per X number of residents. That is a little bit tougher. I think a better way maybe through zoning, one license per
Through what?
square mileage.
Zoning.
I was gonna make this similar. You can make them a certain amount of distance from each other,
Mhm.
which would achieve the same thing without getting into population. So you can make them 1,000 feet from each other, 1,000 feet from a school or a church, similar to a liquor store. Sort of restrictions to limit where they can get to.
Is that 1,000 feet the same as the distance, as the distance we have now from the liquor stores or the pour by the drink?
It is not, and that's something we'll be getting into the next ordinance, but that's exactly what I thought of as well. And the measuring is a little different, so when we go to the next ordinance, we'll definitely talk about that as well. And then for age restrictions, entry into the premises shall be restricted to the person's 21 years of age or older, except employees. I 100% get the reasoning behind that. I do see a challenge practicality wise.
Yeah.
Say I'm stopping with my daughter. She's too young to leave in the car. I would have to take her in. So that could be a problematic piece, especially for like a gas station that's selling these things. Versus a
Right.
So
standard.
have the age restriction, but with a consenting adult with them or something.
So will, so in my eyes, like obtaining a special use permit for the vape shop, when that is their main course of business, the 21 and over makes sense to apply. In a convenience store, you can't really do that. So is there a way to put it in there stating if there's, if so much of their profits are coming from these items, then you have to be 21 and up to go in?
Yeah, you can separate by classification. However, this ordinance is by license type, that includes all 3. I would think you can separate them by what they're classified as far as the store goes.
So like, I'm just saying like with a liquor store, you have to be 21 to go in the liquor store, right? Or
Yeah,
you
you
can't,
have to be 21 to purchase, and I'm wondering if the state law for all this stuff is 21, I think. And I don't, so I
It is.
think state law probably protects your concern of they can't purchase it unless there's money.
but isn't it like if children cannot go in the liquor store?
Yeah, they can.
They can.
They can.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I don't know why. We still like.
So that was my initial thought was this sounds better, more better, but if we're gonna have employees in there that are younger than 21 and children have to be with their parents, it is.
I think the state law
It needs to be
here
the
if you're
same.
concerned, if an 18-year-old walks into a tobacco shop,
Mhm.
they're not gonna be able to buy anything. I don't know. Really, and it's an enforcement thing. What are you gonna do to them?
Right.
Well, that was sort of my question is, for a lot of this is, well, there's gotta be enforcement mechanism.
Correct,
I guess it would need to be tailored to what your current business licensing enforcement
yes.
is. So as long as it's, I'm just saying it's consistent.
Yeah.
Um,
For everybody, it's not.
Well, yeah,
it's not gonna be
consistent.
Punitive just because. this
well,
is-
and I would also say that in my community, we have our alcohol ordinance is based on separation by distance. I mean, I mean, for distilled spirits
Right.
sales, not in addition to all the other distances from uses. They can only be 250. They could be 250 yards. Well, the unintended consequence of that is as we annex that property, well, then suddenly, well, there's no other limitation on it. So it's like, how many liquor stores do you want? It's a policy question for council, but
Right.
it is easy enough to measure and trying to, because you all can measure, if you had that on where the next likely candidate could go, and you could adjust that number, if you
To make it,
try to
make it fit our current
make it
plan.
fit. Yeah, and I'm just, as long as, that's easy enough to do at the onset. We make people turn in a survey. So that may be in your application package for this, they have to turn in a drawing that clearly shows that they meet the distance requirement between another, similar business. That's,
And then the language of it being behind, non-opaque glass or being hidden, that would remain part of the ordinance, right?
Right, that was the.
They're not, they're not, the kids aren't seeing it when they come in. I'm just saying they all coincide together. If they're not seeing it when they come
So what-
into the store.
So what we could say is, where it says age restriction, we're not gonna limit entry. We're just gonna say when it's purchased according to state law, because it's already.
But we don't have to say that because it's already started, right?
And then we'll just make sure that age verification, that's the second part of this is retailers shall verify customer age using a government issued identification technology or similar electronic verification methods, and that will eliminate, the fake ID issue.
So in the liquor store, they don't use that though. So are we for everything that's 21 and up?
Again, it's an enforcement thing. I mean, underage kids are gonna find
Right.
licenses.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we need to consider eliminating this one.
I guess,
The only thing I'm looking at is I'm thinking in terms of like kids hanging out,
Right.
okay? And hanging out without adults there, maybe there's one of age in the entire group. Is there a way to write something that sort of protects that position? Because I have heard, and I don't know, I haven't been there, but I've heard that that is one of the issues that we have had up here, is that there's a lot of teenagers that would gather and they would get somebody of age to go in and purchase for them, or, and I realize you can't totally eliminate that, but you can maybe help with them hanging out inside.
How do we enforce that though?
Well, I'm thinking, okay, my brain goes to like, the movie theater, you have to have the adult with you if you're in a certain age range.
This set of ordinances is really regulating the business owner, the license.
The license.
They're not gonna really be able to control who comes into their store necessarily.
Right.
If we eliminate number one, then I see benefit from number two, and I like the way you're thinking, yeah, because we should require number sort of thing. If it's gonna be good for one, it should be good for all.
I guess the broader question I have is, what are you all trying to regulate? Because I imagine there's gonna be more gas stations popping up around this new roundabout eventually.
Right.
A lot of gas
There's already
stations
plenty
sell
of-
cigarettes and tobacco vapes or whatever. Are you all trying to regulate that as well, or are you all more concerned about the hemp-based products and other?
I think personally, I'm more concerned of having a store in Walnut Grove that the kids know to come to get what they want. That's my concern. And what time does this business stay open till? Specifically Sparkwell, because the convenience stores close at like 10 p.m. They have business license now, but the convenience stores, I believe, close at 10 p.m. What time does Sparkwell close?
I'd have to look at the application.
I want to say I seen it 1 a.m.
You could put, in this ordinance, you could put, I mean, it would relate back then, but going forward, you could put time restrictions on when they could be open.
Because I see, teenagers coming down 81 and 138 at 12:30 at night in a probably not a great situation.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you were asking, or Joe, you were saying, how do we enforce this? How are we gonna enforce these things? And I think that's kind of the point of these ordinances. The goal is to provide for the lapse in enforcement and regulation from the state laws. State laws are established to allow for the sale of these products, but there is literally one agency that's enforcing them, and it's Department of Agriculture. So it's up to us to try to navigate through this so that we can make sure that we're not prohibiting businesses while also protecting our youth. And that's really our goal here. Or at least I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to protect the youth is really what it is, so we can do that and not,
Yeah,
turn over the apple cart, we'll be good.
and if we have an issue at one of the stores, like the kids hanging out,
Right.
then we look to the fining and suspension, et cetera.
Well, and like you said, like you were mentioning about a group of teenagers and an older one, buying what they want anyway. That's contributing to the delinquency of a minor shop. Somebody who's running the shop would know that that's happening. It's up to them to call the proper enforcement body, which would not be the city of Walnut Grove. That would be
But I think
a
that's
legal issue at that point, and
Yeah.
call the sheriff's department,
But
but
some of this is falling back on parenting and can't enforce that.
we cannot enforce parenting. That is correct, and that's not it. It's just to provide for a way to navigate through this. And provide as much guidance and regulation as we can.
Well,
so that
yeah.
we're not being overrun by places that are derelict.
If there's an ordinance against loitering, wouldn't that cover it?
Yeah, absolutely. It would cover some of that. All right.
It still goes back to enforcement.
But if we see an issue, if we've got some kind of teeth here, then at least we have that ability to go in and enforce, whereas right now we have nothing to enforce.
That is correct.
You know, we have no teeth. We can't really do anything about it. And I think that's what we're looking for is, if needed, if the establishment is allowing the people to hang out and, because they're making money off of that,
Right.
then we can enforce on them for loitering and the other things. So,
All right.
You're gonna say something
But
like.
it still comes back to enforcement. We can pass all the ordinances we want, but it comes down to enforcement.
right. But if you don't have a law for enforcement, then you can't enforce.
That's what we're looking at.
Right.
Any more discussion?
Just a quick thought on, I know we're kind of talking about the both of the tobacco and vape.
Yep.
Just when it gets ready to go to form, there are a couple of the zoning districts mentioned in your go by or you don't have those in the city.
Yeah.
So just that just needs to be adjusted for your zoning districts. And I did notice that this one does have some distance requirements, the ordinance regulating location, smoke, vapor, and retail. So it could be, if these end up being sort of joining, that you've got some of that in there. And I do know, like the city of Grayson and some other places we've worked have gone through this a couple years ago. Because normally it's reactive to somebody want to come in and do this activity. We had to go in and regulate or define what microblading was for estheticians, you know, you kind of. So, I mean, currently, I will say the zoning ordinance does permit with a conditional permit like a hookah lounge, and there are supplemental standards. So I would like to be able to assist when we get to taking the first thing you discussed, you know, to at least QC it, see that. My fear is some of this is we go in and change something. If we don't check everything, we gotta go back and.
Right.
You'd rather have one that changes whatever the,
Right.
like we.
Yeah.
I think from a standpoint of a fellow, local official that you know, if you don't have it on the books, then the people that come up and say, why aren't you doing something? Well, now if you've got something, say, well, we're working on it, it's got, you know, we have to, and we'll work on the other things, because at some point you may have enough businesses in here to where your budget would allow for a marshal or something to assist in some of that, you know.
Yes, sir.
You know, I understand. But we have a police department, but we're, you know, our folks are trying to focus on community policing and traffic enforcement, because our locals want people to slow down. So they will go and, you know, they have done stings on the underage selling, but, you know, a lot of that will eventually, you'll be able to check up against that. But y'all do have the power of the business license, is, you know, a lot of the other penalties for if they aren't cooperating. So.
Is there something in here, or I'm unaware, if somebody is caught selling to underage people a certain number of times, are their business license revoked? Is that actually in the ordinance?
So that is harder to regulate or enforce too, because it's actually on the individual clerk doing the selling, not on the business license holder.
Say that again.
The person who stands behind the cash register and sells, it's up to them to perform their due diligence. They would be responsible, not necessarily the.
You can
license holder.
revoke for underage selling.
Really? Okay, then I'm.
So yeah, if they're not meeting any of the standards within place, that would be reason for an administrative action against the business. I think one good thing to keep in mind as far as what we just spoke about is you can always delegate responsibility, but not accountability.
Okay.
So even though that clerk is responsible, I'm still accountable to that clerk as a business owner.
Thank you.
So is there a number of times that somebody is caught?
But the issue, this comes up a lot with liquor stores and gas stations selling alcohol, really. It is, you know, you heard that some kid in town bought it is not enough to revoke it, but it's
Oh, right.
it's usually a speeding of some sort.
Right.
Like if our law enforcement showed up and issued a citation court date and it was found they were guilty of this, then that would be substantive. For our purposes of saying we're gonna revoke because you're not meeting our standards. Yeah, you can't do it on here.
So we have the option of all the things that were listed, whether we fine or revoke or whatever.
Well, I still think that Erica's question is valid, because she's like, is there a metric? Is it once, is it
Is
twice?
there a standard?
Or is it the first time? I mean,
You
That would be in our code enforcement.
you can spell it out in here, where one is sort of a warning, and then if you get another one within some sort of time period, year time period, then it's a suspension of license for some time, and you know, 3 strikes you're out sort of thing.
What if we say something like, if you are actually cited for selling to an underage minor, the minimum fee is $1,000. Like, if so, then when they come to court, they're responsible for paying $1,000. I just feel like if somebody is selling to a minor, if it's worth $1,000 and for a $10 vape,
Okay,
then
I like where that's going, so. Okay. If we did, if we did it like that, where it would be a fine, but also turning this into, if you do it more than like a restructure out, like, let's say, for instance, say it's 2 times, okay, you've done this twice now. So now we can not only, revoke your license, but we can revoke, special use permit and everything else. And say,
As well as
you
you
can't reapply for X amount of years or whatever, correct?
The special use permit is probably a little harder to revoke. If it's actually proper, yeah.
Oh, it's attached to the property.
Yeah, it's everything.
All right.
so is my thought process correct in saying the fine is $1,000 per time you are actually cited for selling to an underage person? And then after the 3rd time, your business license will be revoked.
I know with a lot of tobacco regulations and stuff like that, some of it's statutory. About fining and.
I'd have to look into it.
Your currently proposed ordinance, this section 10 says the city may suspend or revoke a tobacco and hemp retailer license after notice and a opportunity for a hearing if the license holder violates the ordinance, sells products to underage individuals, and violates state or federal law related to regulated substances. So the way it was proposed is it would,
It's broad.
well, and I think there's probably a good reason for that. I'm sorry for sitting down. I've lost my.
I think I'm on that wrong number 10. Which one are you on?
Well, this is on, the licensing requirements. I think that's number 10.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
And this would be the reason to combine them all, so it's all.
right, so, and I think that this would be, now this says if. So there would need to be, a reasonable assumption that the license holder, violated the ordinance, selling or some other way, so then they have an opportunity for a hearing. I'm assuming that's with mayor and council to come up and say, you know, and then then you have the opportunity, and this is basically the first one, you could say your license is revoked or suspended, so that gives you a little bit more.
Claim.
Well, it gives you some more clout, also gives you some more opportunities to understand the what happened, the dynamics, because you're conducting it like not quite like a court case. There's a hearing process, so you would just, they could come up and talk to you all, and then, you know, this is probably separate than if there was an issue before the municipal court.
Right.
But I mean, that's where the penalty part would come in. So I probably it's just making sure that those,
Make it-
that you've got both. I'm thinking you have both opportunities to pursue both avenues, because what you really, I'm thinking you want is just for first, them not, you know, for those behaviors not to happen, for them to just sell their products and then
Yes.
in a safe and effective,
Yes.
reasonable manner. And but we also know that somebody's gonna try to
Right.
go around it, which is human nature, but, so some of that's there. I'm just saying, I'm just thinking, just if when you, as you refine it and take at least these two and kind of
Yeah.
put them together, I think it may help get a lot of those,
Right.
It
didn't need to be through.
Well, no,
We
it's,
still have another one to discuss too, so.
well, I mean, I think, but it's, I think this is where you start is having, if somebody's idea is work it to where it gets to be a form that's explainable to the public
Yes.
and
That's
to,
the goal.
to adopt it.
Yeah.
Is it more practical in some cases to have more like protocol? You have the laws and the ordinances, but you have protocol of how you approach. What's the word I want here?
Formation, enforcement.
The enforcement,
Yeah.
or is it best to have it spelled out 100% in the ordinance?
think you're gonna want to have some sort of procedure spelled out. I don't think just a unwritten or not in the ordinance policy, because then people don't know what they're up against.
Right, yeah, I know you want part of it in the ordinance, but I was thinking in terms of like she was talking about, 3 times you're out type thing, because I think sometimes you need to look at each case and what took place. Like he said, come to here, and I like that idea because there could be circumstances that you didn't anticipate.
Right.
And you don't necessarily want to be so hardcore that you have to revoke when there were extenuating circumstances, maybe.
Right, so kind of what, I think Joe was alluding to is, when an appeal comes to a council, it's quasi judicial in nature. If you want to think of it that way, it gives you a chance to hear aggravating circumstances, like say they willfully did it versus, they got tricked by a fake license. It's kind of what we did before was, the measurements were spelled out of you did this automatically brings reputation. I think you could do a combination, if it's very egregious, this is how you know you're gonna get it instantly. Everything else could be hearing based before council, that way council can hear those issues from the line.
Any more discussion on item number 2? All right, well, let's move on to item number 3, and here we are again with proposed ordinance for regulating location of smoke, vape, and hemp
And
retail.
let me start with, I did not hear earlier that combining this one with the previous one seemed to be the most logical.
And this one too. also.
Yeah, I think they probably all need to be combined to an extent. There will be a section that's in your regular ordinances and then a section for the zoning aspect of it. But I think that those should be together other than different places. Because then you're gonna have people looking at one ordinance thinking they're complying and there's another ordinance on the same topic in another.
Plus,
place.
we avoid redundancy too.
Yeah.
Right, and I know that, all right, so first up on this one, on section 3 permitted zoning districts, we don't have these districts zoned on our current zoning, designator. But it was just to give an idea of what is possible, like you could limit to outside of the downtown overlay or inside the downtown overlay or, that sort of thing. But just to give an idea of where would probably be most beneficial for these types of retailers to belong.
Right.
And taking into consideration where they are now.
Such helps us review.
Comments, anyone?
We have spoken about that, and that's one of the comments I had, just the zoning districts.
Yeah.
You did mention something about the downtown overlay, and I think, that is gonna be important. Downtown or central business districts right below the zoning area. Using some verbiage that we already have, if it's the downtown overlay, having it, some metric inside of that or outside of that. Separation of distance requirements. So we do have different standards for, how many feet or alcohol as, this program already stated. I think having those similar will help enforcement.
Yeah.
Just that way it's not, for instance, beer and wine sold at a gas station, it'd be real complicated to have one distance requirement for their tobacco use and one for their beer and alcohol.
Right, it needs to be the same thing. Yeah.
What is the distance for the beer and alcohol?
I don't know off the top of my head, I can give a shot in the dark, but I believe it's.
The alcohol is, at least liquor is largely regulated by the state. The state has minimums. You can
Yeah.
go higher than that. We'd have to look, but generally it's either 500 feet or 1,000 feet from school, church.
I know for restaurants, it was a lot shorter.
Yeah.
For a
For-
port.
Assumption
Yeah,
from-
In Pontiac,
I think it was 100,
maybe.
something like there. But having similarities will help a
Yeah.
lot with enforcement. Also, the way in which we measure is different here than it is in our ordinance, for alcohol. We measure door to door for alcohol. Here it talks about property line to property line. I think that can give a odd standard, to where you can play with that a little bit to make it happen. I think, primary door is probably the best bet.
Yeah.
Whatever you choose, I would just make it consistent, so you're not having two different measurements for two different businesses.
Oh my God.
Let me ask just one question, and I say this because I don't know Georgia law on this or local laws. I know when I was in Florida, a lot of churches would have events that would have liquor at their events. Is that totally separate from all of this sort of thing?
Yes, so
Okay.
that would be a special event. We do have a permitting requirement for that as well. And it depends on if it's a caterer or if
But I
it's,
mean, I'm talking about the distance, does that come into play? That,
No, it's not their primary business.
okay, all right. So that can still happen. Okay,
It's a special use permit, basically.
I was,
sometimes those are the best fundraisers for churches, unfortunately, but
Right.
We've never done it at our church, Mitzi.
we call it a water. And then the last note I would like to put on all of these ordinances is when we comes time to where we have all this settled out, we may need to start thinking about a regulatory fee for our fee schedule. And I think I've only seen one city that regulates fees for tobacco, and that's Winder. I haven't seen any other city do that necessarily. Now, cities regulate all sorts of stuff. There may be some state laws that has influence on that. So we'll have to look into that too.
y'all gonna be busy. You're welcome.
All right.
Earn your keep.
If there's no more discussion on that item, thank you guys for the great discussion on this. We'll get busy reminding them. And number 4 is discussion for proposed amendment to accessory dwelling units. I'll open it up for discussion.
I can throw a couple of things out there because I had sent Joe a note saying, what brought this up?
That's what I was wondering about.
And then in speaking with Rachel, I got a little bit more insight as to kind of the thought process of why this showed up. And I had gone down an entirely different track with it, with my mind of what we might be looking at. So my understanding is it was kind of brought up because like if someone were considering putting an accessory unit on their property, like for a caretaker. That's kind of why it came into play. And so with that in mind, I know we do have some very basic laws already in place for that. I'll look those up.
I can speak to that. So currently, the only ordinance I could find that allowed sort of different standard of living was an emergency ordinance that was passed for COVID, I believe. But I believe by this council as well. In our ordinances, I do not see a dwelling accessory unit allowed, but I think there's plenty of structure allowed, structural units. And then I'll just go over some of my notes real quick, that way when discussion happens, these are already there. Under number permitted, section 4, general standards, only one ADU shall be permitted per lot containing one primary single family home. My question would be, will this apply to accessory structures as well? So say I already have a small barn or a building in the back, would I be able to then have separate ADU? Since it's not a dwelling unit, it's just a.
Right.
And my answer to
Did
that
you
question
look
is
at-
yes.
It's in our zone, I think it's zoning ordinance 901C23.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're wanting. Somewhere I have another copy here. We're going to copies here. Mhm. It would be mainly the last section. Did you see that one, Joe?
So I think we do have some things that are conflicting in the ordinances, so I'll look into that as well.
You can take that. I found myself.
So yeah, we'll have to clean up some ordinances as well, and we do have areas that does not allow for outside of primary dwelling inside. So we'll just have to look at that. Size limitations, it does have 1,000 square feet or 20% of the unit, square foot or floor area. Our structural accessories have 1,400 square feet and 50% surface area. So I guess the question is, why would this be different than the structural?
Because this is for living, whereas a structure would potentially be for, housing or golf carts near lawnmowers. Because this is a, living unit, would potentially put, stress on the existing sewer and or septic systems. If they put in the bathrooms, which I think in order to be considered a accessory dwelling unit must contain a bathroom.
Right, I think that would be regulated through building codes. And then environmental and our sewer policies as well. I just think enforcement may get, not enforcement, but approval could get mixed up in that.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
It's just something to consideration.
I like that. So we already have these regulatory. And zoning.
And then, for setbacks, these setbacks are different than, some of our other ones. They're actually, shorter distances. So rear setback here is 10, under accessory structures it's 20, and then 15 for side yards versus 10.
Right.
There could be a practical reason for that. As in, say if it's a smaller lot size, I can see where that practicality could be needed. However, usually setbacks are for the neighborhood properties. So that's maybe something that we need to look at.
Is there a minimum lot size? Like, you have to have at least so many acres to have an accessory?
Well,
It says, section 4 says meet minimum zoning district lot size requirement.
Right, and I don't see that lot size requirement in.
that's in our, this is our current ordinance.
Right.
For it, but it took me a while to find it.
And that. My goal is to help us find.
But see, it's an entirely different size requirement. This is 400 square feet. And it dictates how many people can live in it. Okay.
Did it say in there, the minimum lot size? My worry is if every home in Emerald Cove
It
tries
says-
to put a.
Well, it says subject to the
backyard.
following setback requirements,
Well, and
which
this says 10 feet, the new one. And that one says 15. Right?
For side yards, 20 per rear.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit expensive for 20-foot setback, in my opinion.
It could be.
I mean, when it says, subject to setback, there may be any setback requirements we have in place.
A lot of times lot size is really, for most scenarios, I can see where there's gonna be a few that wouldn't control it, but most scenarios will be controlled by the primary dwelling. So usually if it's a small lot size, you can have a smaller house. Then you can only need a certain percentage of that house. Now, with some of the bigger neighborhoods or big lot size neighborhoods, I can see where it comes at 5 acres, but monster house under for some reason, where this could turn into, the maximum size. But,
Yeah, see, our current dwelling accessory limits it to 800 square feet.
And if we already have that and we're satisfied with that limitation,
But that's kind of what I was thinking.
this is just a
I
proposal.
can't,
And I agree that smaller is probably dictated just just because most of our homes are around 2,000 square foot in the city, so. I couldn't imagine putting 1,000 square foot building on the back of my.
Right, on a half acre, 3/4 of an acre
We
lot.
could all be like sardines.
But yeah, I'll definitely do some research on this place.
I mean, having lived in an 800 square foot house, that's a pretty sizable house.
Yeah.
But this does also limit it to be occupied by only 2 people. Which I think is probably a good idea, because if you're looking in the situation of adding a dwelling unit. For a caretaker or to move mother closer so that you can caretake her, which I think it's an either or situation. It also essentially says you can't then rent that out
Yeah.
to anyone. It has to be a situation. And in discussion is with Rachel at one point, we did say, well, how do you enforce that? And keep up with it, make sure they're not rented.
But that's just the purpose and intent, paragraph or section 1, paragraph number 2 is to provide opportunities for aging in place, multi-generational living, workforce housing, and caregiver housing. So potentially it could be rental income. But does our current ordinance prohibit that? Because there's, I mean, I'm not going to be knocking on, I would expect our code enforcement officer to be knocking on accessory dwelling unit doors and asking for proof that they're,
Not a tenant.
yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit more complicated than code enforcement because it's in a backyard.
Right.
It does not
And
specify that.
Yeah. So I feel like it should limit the use in that way. Not beneficial for whoever may be looking there, it's not beneficial for the homeowner. Because I mean, we can't expect that somebody and their parents who are living in this accessory dwelling area are gonna own that house forever. They move, they can't tell the next person, you have to only let your parents live here.
An additional consideration is under parking. It says 1 additional off-street parking space shall be required. That could be an issue. We already have parking issues in some neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to off-street. So I can see that being a little bit of a.
It would be a limitation on allowing, and I think that's kind of the point, if you don't have room for a parking space off street. Then maybe you don't know.
Well, this almost justifies having an additional space.
Right.
I have not far as, well, I had an accessory dwelling unit. I had that.
I think that if you have an accessory dwelling unit, you should at least have enough road frontage in your house to have an additional driveway. Otherwise, I can see everybody throwing up an ADU and, you know, having additional income or, and I get it, I get the want for that, but then you're changing the entirety of the neighborhood. You know, you're pretty much turning the neighborhood into an apartment complex. And I don't think that that is not, if you want an apartment complex, go get a PUD done and build an apartment complex. I don't think everybody should have the ability to have an ADU.
One of the things I would want to prevent with this, which we have in place right now, is that you don't have some investor that comes in, buys a smaller home, builds a secondary unit of 400, 800 square feet on there, and they're renting out both. Now, this does prevent that by saying it must be owner occupied in the main dwelling.
Didn't it say in here somewhere that you had to live in the primary residence?
Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. So I would want to make sure that we maintain that aspect of things.
Yeah, section 2 says the secretary is obtained.
But that also becomes an enforcement factor.
Exactly, and how do you prove somebody's not living there? As long as their license are there and their
Well,
homestead exemption is
Yeah,
there.
if they're licensed, okay. Let's put it this way, if we have some of our landlords like we have around here, it's pretty obvious they don't live here. Those are pretty easy to prove that they are not owner occupied. You know, you're gonna have some get through the cracks.
But those lots aren't gonna have an ADU on them anyway, there's not even space on them. You know what I mean? Like some of the, like, for instance, some of the rentals in Forest Glen. They already,
Right, those won't happen.
So what I'm hearing is that we want additional protection. and
I'm
changes in
thinking
characteristics.
of a home in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
okay,
For example, that's a rental.
I know what you're talking about, okay.
And for somebody to put up another structure on that one when we've already got kind of a nightmare, that just wouldn't be a good thing. But we also know the owner doesn't live there right now.
Right.
I think having the additional driveway as being mandatory,
Yes, instead of a one parking space.
yeah, because
I think our goal here is
But
to
if you're
make,
moving mother in, she doesn't necessarily
Maybe
need.
she's not able to drive.
Right,
Correct.
she doesn't even
well,
have.
it's not
a vehicle.
based on a need, it's based on what you have space for on your property.
I can see that being valuable, however, parking is already regulated. But it may not need to be a standard for this, but an enforcement action when they don't meet our parking standard.
Right.
However, we have shown that that can be complicated with our current setup. There's very little that a code enforcement officer can do when it comes to the parking violation. By the time it gets corrected, the issue's already resolved. It's about roughly 6 to 8 hours to get someone over there to move it or cite it. That's just kind of more complications with our system, right?
Gotcha.
Because there is, in the ordinance, it does say you have to have so many feet of road frontage for an additional driveway. I don't remember what it is, but, I think it might be 150.
Yeah, I think our current ordinance is fairly good and maybe just take what we've got there, the better points from that, implement into what we currently have in place. So it might be,
I would like to see this on the next work session, and I'm not cutting anybody off, but I want to see exactly what you just said. I want to see this fitted into the ordinance that we already have.
combine it into one and see what we come up with.
And also you want to make sure that we are, providing additional protections, from changing the characteristics of the neighborhood, correct?
Right, our
And make
current,
sure that it doesn't conflict, like this says 1,000 square feet meeting minimum distance. Make sure it doesn't conflict with our current zoning, so that this will basically be an amendment, if any, to what we currently have, just to short up. Is that what I'm hearing?
yeah, the current ordinance says the accessory dwelling shall be constructed with the same or similar and compatible exterior style, materials, roof type, slope doors, window style, proportions, color, trim, and landscaping as the principal dwelling.
Right.
So essentially, you know, your cottage has to match your house.
Yeah.
I think that pretty well protects what you're putting up there.
Okay. Do you want to have this on the next work session or next council?
The next work session, I think it's the third work session.
I think so. Lindsay, you want to?
These are just my notes, but if you'll take that and make a copy for everybody.
I want to put this into everybody's head too.
Yeah.
The blue building that I have out beside my house,
Thank you.
that building is 36 by 16. In order to be 800 square feet, it would only have to be 40 by 20. So we're talking about 4 feet bigger on each side. So if somebody gets one of those and sets it up in their,
What is it?
the blue building out by my house. It's blue, you think this.
It's a storage.
I mean, it's a storage building, and if you just have something that large for somebody to live in on some of these lots that are only 80 feet wide, in Emerald Cove, the lots are 80 feet wide, most of them. That is just going to get very on top of each other, and that's what I worry about. In Cambridge Chase, those lots are so narrow and hilly. Magnolia, I feel like, is a little bit more spaced out, and then your neighborhood, you have
Right.
tons of space. But I worry about those neighborhoods that are already driveway to driveway. to
Well, by the
driveway.
time you reach setback requirements and all of that, you're certainly limiting how large you can go.
Right.
Right,
And you're gonna limit,
The big limiting factor in all this is the fact that those lots aren't big enough to put another house on in the septic tank. I think
Right.
and I do like the sewer provision, until you get sewer into those established neighborhoods, like, there's no way you could do this in Forest Glen, because you really, they're too small really for what you've got, but so that would be a limiting factor by the time you do and you would somebody would have to go out there and prove to you all as a permitting entity that they can make it work, and David
Right.
Dixon agrees that the additional flow would not overwhelm the existing septic system.
Right.
So a lot of that's concerned, I think, at least for the,
being-
and unless you all decide you're gonna prioritize expanding sewage into developed neighborhoods, which I mean is certainly a policy
Right.
discussion that you have to have capacity for. I think some of this I think will not become an issue.
At all, because.
Well, at least not in the near future, but it is, I mean, this is such stuff that you have to
Right, consider.
you have to consider, and you're right, it could very well, it could change the nature of the neighborhood because of a lot of the stuff, I think, that kind of a structure might not pass building inspection to be habitable. So that may also provide that protection, but, and I do like the fact that there is not a currently a definition for accessory dwelling units, so if nothing else, that was something that got missed 10 years ago when we did some tweaking on this. That needs to be added just to clarify this. And we can assist on that if needed to help.
Yeah.
Wander through those things. But once you have more sewer in the community, then chances are the other issue factor is if anybody who wants a new neighborhood is on sewer, those lots are gonna be so small that there really wouldn't be rooms for an
Right.
ADU.
Right.
So Maxine's neighborhood is probably the only one I can think about where they're so big that it
They
could
have
be
septic.
done, it could be done with, logistically, but
yeah, the current law requires you have a kitchen area, a bathroom, and I think one bedroom. So,
For what? For an accessory dwelling unit,
right,
our law?
yes.
Great.
So it requires that you have, I had her make a copy of it, so y'all just had it on hand. Right on the back, rather than having to look it up. Thank you. Now, some of this may have been just stuff I was grabbing as I was looking for it. It's mainly page 2, 901C23.
thank you.
Back 2 pages. So with it stating that you have a kitchen and at least one, but no more than 2 bedrooms. So in other words, you can't go but so long.
Right.
Can't be higher than the original. And this says an accessory dwelling unit should have at least one paved off-street parking space dedicated for the use of that building. In addition to any other parking spaces. So that limits
Yeah,
who can put in what because they just wouldn't have the space for it.
gotcha. All right, that's. Anybody else want to? We're done on that one. Any more discussion? Let's move on to number 5. Compensation of Walnut Grove elected officials. I will open this for discussion. You want me to talk? Okay.
Yeah, you start.
Hold on 1 second. It's on here for. Well, okay. So in looking at the city of Walnut Grove and how we are currently compensated as elected officials, that number is set by us with the assistance of some information that we can get from various public sources, including Georgia Department of Community Affairs. They have this little booklet that shows based on population, categories A through F, I think, and we were in the F tier, but we are moving into the E tier now, and we'll be in the D tier before too long. So we really need to discuss what that means and why we need to consider giving the attention to the amount we are compensated, because as we are growing in population, neighborhood sizes, neighborhood availability, commercial growth, the demands that are being put on us as council and mayor are going to be increased. We're going to see a lot less time to go through ordinances and be nitpicky, and a lot more time spent on making sure that our ordinances fit our growth and that sort of thing. And it's gonna be more work. And more work really should demand a higher pay. This election, we got lucky and got to continue with our current council as is, which is fantastic for continuity. But in the future, if I'm not here, or you're not here, or you're not here, or you're not here, reelected, then we need to make sure that we are putting ourselves in a position where we are garnering community interest from the most qualified candidates, not
I agree.
not just begging people to come and do this for free. Yes, we are public servants. Yes, we are serving our community and we enjoy doing so. However, we want to make sure that we're getting high quality candidates to replace ourselves in the future. And I think one way we can do that is to consider our current compensation rate and our growth rate together, both increasing.
I will agree. And since long before going on council, I've been a proponent for seeing that council and mayor were paid what I considered a fair stipend, because it's certainly not a wage for what you end up doing in the time that you put in. But I think a fair stipend is very important because it does encourage more involvement. I know a lot of people think of this as, well, that's a volunteer position that you do for your community. And there's truth in that, but by the same token, not everybody's in a position to do it without getting that extra financial help. We may have some really smart people out there that are going to make great council people in the future, but it puts a hardship on them to do it as a fully volunteer. Now, do I think we should be in a salary range where you're, looking at the high wages? I absolutely do not. But I will say this, when I proposed, it would be at least 6 years ago now, and probably the 10 years before that, I would come to council every budget meeting and encourage council to put in raises.
Right.
And council was always afraid to do that because they felt like they were going to get in trouble with the public for wanting a raise, and the general public thinks of it as, well, you're giving yourself a raise. Number one, we're not giving ourselves a raise. We are giving whoever's in office next a raise.
Correct.
Now, if that happens to be one of us because we run again, then so be it. One well, run and win. But I will say this, the dollar amounts that I was proposing long before any of us came on council were higher than we're currently compensated. So I am certainly looking very seriously at whether or not we should increase.
So I employed AI to go through the entirety of that pamphlet that designates us as population groups A through F, and asked it to give me averages for mayor salary annual and council pay salary annual. That booklet also breaks it down into mayor pro tem or and other factors. So there were some outliers that didn't exactly fit in with a just population based. And when I took those averages, what I noticed is that we are a little below where we should be currently. But because we're growing, we have some wiggle room to increase it even further. So, and we don't know where our population will be once we're finished growing, and I don't think we'll ever be finished growing. And I don't think the demands of our commercial versus population are equally based, if that makes any sense, because I mean, we're doing a downtown here and talking about annexation and things like that. So this is more than just based on population. And
We're no longer status quo for running the city.
right,
We are now building
right,
much more than has ever been being done in the past.
right.
So according to our population growth and the numbers that you ran, what did you find?
That we are more properly aligned with category D.
Which would be,
Which would be, I don't remember the people that is. I'm sorry, hold on, I'm still scrolling through.
Did you get a printout when you was pulling all this stuff up?
No, but I can print it out for you if you'd like, and I can give you the DCA, the link to the website so you can look at, because the DCA, it's called the 2022 Municipal Wage and Salary Survey Compensation for Municipal Elected Officials, and that's available online.
so we're talking about a 4-year-old survey already, and we know what's happening.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, I just want to give a little caveat about DCA salary surveys.
Thank you.
Before I came here, I did Tacoma or Stevens County's salary survey, compensation classifications. So I got to learn a lot about salary surveys. One thing I started with DCA, which like many people know, found a fair amount of inaccuracies when it came to staff members. Not as much with elected officials. There's some considerations you have to take into account with those numbers. It does separate you by population and not by where you are. That does matter.
Yes.
For instance, a lot of these smaller populations are in Central Georgia, where the average compensation for full-time employees is $40,000. Very different than North Georgia.
Right.
You also want to think about, at least for staff members, maybe not compared to electeds, the places around you, because that's usually compensation based. Sadly, you guys don't make a choice that you get to.
Right.
But there are other considerations you can take into account with these. Some places are setting those standards based off of how much work they're doing. There's different structures you can put in place. I've seen cities do. Now, legality will have to go to J as well. Some places have a structure in place where there's a base salary, and then for work functions, they allow for a standard amount for going to those functions. It'd be hard to track things like how much time you're spending at home doing research, things like that. That's usually where that base salary comes into play. Let's say it's a District 5 meeting or something like that, and you decide to go, that is a work function that you're using your time to educate yourself, collaborate with other cities. And some cities do have it in place where you get paid for that. And it kind of creates a fairness in, the council members that are participating in the process are getting paid for that
Yeah.
instead of just the base salary.
I would really like to see us adopt not only a base pay, but also a way to compensate each one of us for the additional things. Like if we get a speaking engagement at a public arena that's representative of the city, if we get if we have to collaborate with office staff and our city attorneys and our city zoning administrator to write ordinances, you know, that should be additional because that's not required, I guess, is what I'm saying.
And as public servants, we should be doing that.
Jay, what are you thinking?
The second part of that concerns me. There's a lot rattling around in my head. I'll have to look into that a little bit more.
Okay.
And some other considerations as far as moving forward with this after this discussion, I would recommend this, have a couple of work sessions, public hearing, because this is going to be one of the most, you want to be as transparent as possible of why the compensation increase is needed, of how we're calculating what that number should be. Obviously, we're stewards of the city's money, taxpayer dollars and things of that nature, so we want to make sure that we're showing this is why it's needed. And obviously, when it comes to compensation increases at any level of government, this is probably where you want to be as thorough as possible.
And this is where my mind goes with the second part that you were just talking about. Writing ordinances and collaborating with attorneys and administrator and stuff like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. As a council member, I feel like it's my job to find the issue and it's their job to write it out. And then it's council's job to review it during a work session and decide if they want to make changes to it or whatnot. And so if I'm not pointing fingers and I'm not saying you're not doing your job. If a council member is given an issue to the city attorney or to Joe and it's not getting done, then that may be an in-house issue that needs to be looked at. Because as council members, even if somebody is highly educated, and we increase their pay, there's no way we're gonna be able to be competitive with their actual job.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you have to have a servant's heart. And then you have to have the backup staff that gets the job done so that then you can review it and vote on it.
Right.
Um,
So, in my opinion, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we as council members are the legislative body, meaning we should be creating ordinances for proposal to our governing body to have it passed. That's my opinion. I don't know that to be true, but if you want to look at it from elementary school level of three-tier government that has checks and balances, the mayor is considered our executive branch with Joe as the administrator being the daily enforcement of all of our ordinances. And then we're the legislative body. We create the laws and we vote the laws to the mayor and the mayor signs off on them or she could veto them.
I agree with that, except for the fact that education wise, we're not educated enough to actually make the ordinances like that in the city.
That's why we pay. That's why we pay an administrator.
I think it's my job to say, hey, this needs to be an ordinance, make it an ordinance.
Yeah.
You know?
So I'll speak. Beauty of local government is, as a council, you're the, legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial.
Mhm.
So it kind of mixes and matches where it fits, right? So last year, y'all decided to create this position that I'm in, state administrator. Some cities have a city manager, gives a little bit more discretion to become that executive piece. Here, my job is to carry out the wishes of council through policy. That can be done in different ways. That can be done, as Ms. Miles was stated, through, hey, we have this issue. We need to craft an ordinance, and that's what these work sessions are for. Traditionally, since I've been here, we have crafted an ordinance for you to look over. It doesn't have to be that way. For instance, there was no documentation on, we just want to talk about. And that can be what it is for an issue too, that we want to eventually craft an ordinance for. That's what these work sessions are for, is to figure out the mission of council and how best to serve the community. We could go, Ms. Davis's route of some of these ordinances. She crafted a proposal, and we're finding where it fits certain places where it would be an amendment to an already existing ordinance, or where it needs to be a separate ordinance. And what'll happen with those is I'll take those, do that research, compile it together, and create an actual ordinance as a introductory proposal of an ordinance. So it can go both ways. You can create an ordinance, or you can delegate it to me that, hey, we need an ordinance for this. So that's the beauty of this job is.
I'm not telling you to stop doing what you're doing. I think your ideas are great. I just know that if first off, I was making $100 a month for however long I've been on council. And just recently, I was bumped up to the $400 a month. So to me, because I'm so new to that, I'm like, oh, wow,
Well, it's only been 3 years since we bumped it up.
yeah, but we've only been getting that for 3 months.
I started out at $60 a month and I was very happy then.
And so I'm like,
I never went into it for the money.
right.
No.
But, and so even if you were to double that $800, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself only, to say if you were to double the $400 to $800 a month, which I don't think that's what we're asking. But I would almost be like, man, I feel like I am being, and maybe it's trauma. It's too much, like.
Yeah.
It's greed is what it
Yeah,
is.
so.
It's greed.
And maybe I don't have enough time to devote to council like I should be devoting to it, because I'm so busy with my career that I don't have, 30 hours a month to devote to.
But that's why we have a paid staff to do it,
Right,
not to
right.
do everything we say.
I'm just saying, like,
We all kick in and do I think we all kick in and do our part. But
Let me throw something up there from a little different.
we're not here to do everything that has to be done. We pay an attorney, we pay an engineer, we pay a zone administrator, we pay an administrator, we pay a clerk, a deputy clerk.
and I will say that when council
We
takes
got a
on
good
this work,
staff.
we save money in those areas,
Mhm.
when the council does take on more. So I recognize that as well.
Yeah.
Larry.
I'm waiting.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. From a little different perspective, looking at it, when you have a council in place, we're also accountable to the people.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, Linda, I'm gonna ask you to hold your comments while I make mine, if you don't mind. So that I can keep my head straight. Sometimes I have trouble following my own train of thought. But in order for us to be held accountable by the people, sometimes having that compensation in place helps us to do that. Speaking from a citizen's perspective, because like I said, I've been fighting, I fought for what I felt was fair to council, because I also think when we call on, as citizens, when we call on our council people to do things for us, we need to compensate them, just like a church compensates a pastor. A pastor does it for the heart, not for the money. But they should be fairly compensated for what their job is. And I think we need to look at that sometimes from that perspective, so that we do encourage more people to participate, because it does help drawing interest in there. And so by having the right things in place, now I certainly don't think we should ever be trying to make a high-end income for council. But we put in, if we're doing our job, what I feel is our right way, we put in a lot of time and a lot of effort into our research. No, we don't write the ordinances necessarily, but if we're doing what we're supposed to do, even just reading documents, I mean, we have what, 200 pages sent to us Friday that we had to cover between now and then so that the general public knows some of what we're covering in a week's time sometimes. So to read through and sort through and make notes and to try to have valid discussions. I do think it's important that we compensate accordingly to the fact that we're also a small town that counts on community involvement. So I think we need to find that balance. But by the same token, by having those monies there, some people, it's a lot easier to hold them more accountable if they're receiving compensation for that than if they're not.
This is, in my opinion, it is less about benefiting me. Okay, none of us would be eligible to receive this until after the next election cycle, correct? If we chose to raise it, excuse me, if we chose to give a raise. None of us would be eligible for it till the next election cycle. And at that election cycle, this would benefit whoever is elected. It doesn't necessarily mean it would be me, doesn't necessarily mean it would be Maxine or Mayor Moncrief. It just means that it would open it up and be a little more competitive to get the most qualified candidates that we can interested in our city. Yeah, having a servant's heart helps because what I'm proposing is not a whole lot.
What are those numbers? I'm curious.
What I'm proposing, y'all can propose whatever you would like, but for me, these numbers are sitting at $850 for the mayor per month and $475 for council. And that is based on the previous mentioned information that I pulled from
And the mayor's.
the population group D on the compensation for municipal elected officials from BCA's website.
Okay, and the mayor is currently at 7 and council at 4.
But I also have some.
My original amount.
I have a caveat. Because we are in a state of flux, I would propose that this rate of pay would be for 2 years and that we would increase it again to 1,000 for mayor and 600 for council after 2 years. Because after 2 years, our sewer will be depleted. We will be full swing into some serious development in the downtown, not just dirt. And it's going to require a whole lot more from us as council and mayor.
Okay, first thought is we cannot hold future.
Okay.
You can't.
council.
You can't do it tiers. Well, I'm just telling you, those are my thoughts.
I mean, we can suggest that that would be a good idea, and that puts the, puts that in the hat for future council to think and maybe be a little more comfortable making that decision. Because it is hard to sit up here and say, I think there should be more.
Right.
My original amounts, I'm gonna say 11 years ago, where we needed to be at 500 for council and 1,000 for mayor. Now, that time we did not have a city administrator. The mayor was in that role as well.
Right.
That may make some difference in my mind now because that has taken just a little bit of load off the mayor.
Right.
So I mean, I'm comfortable with the numbers that you put out there, the 475 and 850,
So I also had some,
and looking at that range.
and I can tell you now, that's equivalent to 10,200 a year for the mayor and $5,700 per each council member per year. In addition to just, and I'm saying that's base pay. In addition to base pay, I would also like to see a mayor pro tem premium of $125 per month. that is up to us to elect. We can switch it, we can rotate it, everybody can take turns so that during our elected years, we can, we can decide if we want to.
I think I'm opposed to that.
You're opposed to a premium for mayor pro tem position, okay. And then a pay per occurrence incentive pay. Again, for official public speaking engagements, attendance at public meetings beyond regular council meetings that serve the city's interests. That doesn't mean I go to a golf club meeting and I can ask to be compensated and at a rate of $25 per occurrence.
We can do that now if we want. I mean, as an individual, if somebody wants us to come speak, can we ask for compensation?
Hope not.
We can ask for compensation from the person asking.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Tell me no, we can't do that. Really?
Ask for,
Or receive. I won't say ask.
Ask for
We can-
money if somebody asks us to say something to
I
speak.
don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think my concern about the city compensating is who's gonna determine when it's paid.
Yeah.
I don't think we're
I
ready
ain't
for
backing
that.
that, no
Okay.
way.
That's where I am
This
with
is
that. I
just
don't think
discussion,
the city is
okay.
ready for
Eric, what do
something
you
like
think? Do you think
that.
that's silly?
Um,
I'm sorry, silly. What do you think about this? About getting mayor pro tem premium and per occurrence incentive pay?
I don't think a mayor pro tem premium, I don't think I would agree with that.
Okay.
And as far as going places, maybe attendance to, different events like, the chamber or GMA events. $25, I can see that just because of, it takes gas to get there.
Don't we already, aren't we
Don't we
already
already
allowed
pay
more
Fresh?
if we
Two.
choose to?
If it's a certain amount, it's a certain outlay, I think is this.
Yeah, I think it's over 60 miles.
So right now, the only thing that we really offer that for is because we only think utilized was GMA, Santa. However, now that there's more conferences, I can see that be a different scenario.
Right.
For instance, I
What
don't
it's
know.
been in the past is over 60 miles, especially training, but also other events over 60 miles. If you chose to put in for the mileage.
I can see,
So these are.
I think the 60 miles could be decreased.
Right,
It's not 60 miles to Atlanta.
right.
Right.
Yeah, we're
And
in a
yet,
position
with
to-
parking it, yeah.
Average, which is 3 years.
Right. And then I do think there should be a cap, like, it's not, you can't go to 2 a month and expect to be reimbursed, or even 1 a month to be reimbursed. Maybe it should be,
One a year.
well, you have your GMA quarters, and then you have maybe go into to a chamber event or a district meeting or something like that. So maybe 2 a quarter.
I don't think there should be a limit of it. I think
all
it
of-
should be administratively
Think
decided that we got it in the budget to do it or not do it.
whatever y'all decide, you'll probably need to approve it before it happens, because then people can just rack up $25 and then, look at it as they're going, for instance.
Well, wouldn't this only apply when you're reelected?
Yes, but then,
Right, so
Gas reimbursement mileage, that's not really
that's not really
compensation.
that's a separate issue, but if we're talking about doing a pay per occurrence of $25 for each of the following documented activities, official speaking, attendance at public meetings, origination of ordinances, and working with professionals for city purposes. I also have written out that eligible occurrences must be documented on a city-approved form submitted to the city clerk. Monthly for the inclusion in regular payroll to balance the budget considerations with fair pay. The city may adopt an annual cap of no more than $1,500 of incentive pay per official per fiscal year. For example, not saying that's it, but you know, there's ways to do this without it superseding our current reimbursements for gas, but this is just an idea. If you don't want to pay, if y'all are saying no, then that's fine. This was just my idea, because other cities are doing this. They're also paying a mayor pro tem premium because of the additional responsibilities of a mayor pro tem when acting in place of the mayor. But this is all just up for discussion. So if that's not something that we want to see and we want to just leave it as is, then that's fine.
I would like to see the suggestions that you have printed out,
Yeah.
and it go on the next work session.
That sounds like a good idea. We also have to be concerned with election years and when we take any vote on anything of compensation nature.
And that's why I thought this was the perfect time for that. There's not in an election year, we're not in danger of doing this for ourselves, and I have no guarantee that I will be here next election cycle because I will not be elected. I may not run, who knows, I haven't. We don't know.
It's not even be
qualified yet.
Y'all, if y'all choose to go forward on this, as a reminder, there is pretty strict advertising requirements, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure you gotta vote on it twice,
Yes.
or something like that.
Right.
So no sneaking this one in on especially on paper.
This is not one I would want to try to sneak in.
Not
Good
at all.
advice.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted.
In fact, when I get my phone calls later this week, well, what happened at council meeting? This will be high on my list of, well, one thing we're discussing is the compensation.
Yeah.
So that people do start paying attention, because I'm a strong believer of making sure everybody knows what's going on if they can,
Right.
if they want to know.
Correct. Yes.
Well, obviously, the last pay increase wasn't people weren't that concerned about it. Me and Linda both ran unopposed, so.
So it didn't bring any smarter people than me,
Hey, y'all.
Nobody ran against me.
It might be.
but I always said a few extra dollars won't bring people out.
Gotcha.
It won't make you work harder.
That's correct.
It was a lot more though, yeah. But it's still not, you still have, I say that to say, you still have to have service hard to do
But-
this, because
Right.
if the pay was extended,
If you're
yeah.
gonna be a public servant, you better not think I'm gonna do this for the money.
$400 ain't going too far.
Agreed.
Really.
And,
Agreed.
yeah, and where gas is going lately, we're gonna spend it off, and so we're back to meetings.
All right. All right, we're done with this discussion then. I think we are.
And we're gonna revisit that at the next.
Yes, ma'ams. And in addition to printing this out, I will email it to all of you when I get home this afternoon, okay? So you can see what I have. And I also have the numbers for our current, the averages for our current population group and population group E. We don't exactly fit into population group E at all. And so, but anyway,
I also want to hear what Stephanie has to say since bringing Joe on board and.
And Joe, would you mind checking if we have any, whether it's protocol or in the ordinance, where we have, where, what we do on mileage for, because I was under the impression that like, when we go to the district meeting, if we wanted to put in that mileage, we had the right to do that, like when we drive up to Gainesville or down to Madison. That as a council member, we had the right to put in that mileage for going to that
That's
event
what
and
I
back
thought,
if
if
we
you wanted it.
Well, that's not.
But we've just, I mean, I've always just chosen, yeah, I just drive my car and I go, you know.
There is protocol to that. However, every year, even though it is a protocol, it's also almost a referendum every year with the budget cycle. That is put in place in the budget for lunch.
Right.
Moving right along, discussion item number 6, City of Civility Resolution. Everyone's against this. I'm just kidding.
So, council passed this last year as well. It's a 1-year resolution with GMA promoting civility by elected officials and staff members. Or at least 2 staff members by elected officials. The way I read it is to prevent any bully pulpit or, anything like that, and, promoting actual discussion on council. I think today, this council has shown that this is more than just paperwork, that y'all just had a very, a little bit contentious, but there was some disagreement, and y'all were able to work through that. So, it gives me confidence that we are signing this, but actually living it as well. So that is the whole purpose of this resolution, is to renew our dedication for robust debate and right to self-expression as protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and our fundamental rights and essential components of democratic self-governance.
Fantastic.
So we have to vote on this at the next meeting? Okay.
Sorry. Any discussion or questions on this, guys, ladies? Sorry.
I don't have any.
I think they made a sign back up. And I will say, I had written to Joe and said, did we ever figure out if we landed back with the ethics, city of ethics? Because the paperwork had been done with prior council,
Yeah, we did.
and it was never sent in. So I didn't know if we needed to redo that paperwork or if we could just send it in. And I thought we were supposed to be sending it in. I don't know what happened to that and where that. It's Lynn's fault, I'm sure.
No.
So that is something that I'm looking into now. I wanted to make sure we got through this work session with all the information needed for it. So I am a little bit behind on catching up with the city of ethics stuff.
I know that's wasn't the agenda item, but.
Right. However, I do believe from Mr. Meter's say, I still gotta find the documentation on it, that it was at a minimum fully prepared. There may have been a lapse in actually submitting that. I'm not sure of that yet. If that's the case, then you've met all the requirements of it, and we just have to resubmit it. Because it's through ordinances and action. And those are things that this council's already done.
So I would like for us to follow up, and if we deserve it, let's get it.
Absolutely.
It is. Here's our last item up for discussion or new business is a discussion for the proclamation of Walton County Safe Digging Month, April 2026. So, do you want to lead this, Joe, or you want me to? Sure.
So I know there's a little bit of confusion on the agenda about what we need to do with this. And I'd like to distinguish between ordinance, resolution, proclamation. So an ordinance carries the weight of law for a city. A resolution also carries the weight of law for a city. However, it's usually for a temporary measure or to resolve something within the ordinance that's a gap. A proclamation is an intent or usually a ceremonious procedure. So this does not require it. However, full transparency, it's always best to bring it to council. In that way, if anyone on council disagrees with it, they can voice that. So this proclamation is for Safe Digging Month through Georgia 811. This was brought to our attention by our utility service in the area, Walton MC, asking us to promote this. That way we can get more word out about safe digging. As you've seen, I'm sure in the years y'all lived here, there's definitely been 1 or 2 issues where someone set up to dig without calling first and someone's power went out. I know I've experienced that, and it's a fun and traumatic experience. So this is to promote people utilizing that service offered by the state. People.
Yeah.
I say, have the mayor sign it and send it.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you think? Well, I think Stephanie will sign it and send it. What you think?
Of course.
All right. We're all pro safety.
And see, all those people down on my side of town, I came out there today, it's a mess. I had to go all the way around to even get here.
No pain, no gain. You do what's there.
Close that discussion. There's nothing further, right? Now we're gonna open it up to public comment. Anyone has any public comment at this time, please step forward, state your name and address for the record. Seeing as there is none, we will close public comment and move on to executive session. Is that necessary for today? All right, no. Seeing no executive session, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. And it is unanimous. Thank you, ladies, for an excellent meeting.
Thank you, Rachel. You did a great job.